Hi. I'm a little surprised. I tried to sign on to start this a couple of minutes ago, and I was getting a message from YouTube that said live stream is not available right now. Uh, so good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is episode 27 of the KMG show. The title of this stream is Who's Afraid of the Big Black Box? Well, it would appear that most of the world is not just afraid, but absolutely terrified of the big black box. What is the big black box? Well, I'll get to that in just a minute. To indicate just how terrified people are, here's a story from Market Watch called, Does Washing Your Clothes Prevent the Spread of the Coronavirus? Some folks on social media fret about whether they need to wash or change their clothes to avoid catching COVID-19. Infectious disease experts say you generally don't need to do so more often than usual, and some even warn that a preoccupation with laundry could come at the cost of taking more important measures like washing your hands. Still, there are some best practices to follow when you haul dirty clothes to the laundromat. The average person should not worry about their clothing, says Sarah Fortune of Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. If you are a healthcare provider and potentially subject to a high density of virus, the answer is different. But for most of us, it's all about our face and hands. And let's see, something about polyester? Okay. The coronavirus would likely survive better on artificial fibers such as polyester than on cotton. That's certainly good to know. So let's talk about the black box. There's a story by Madeline Osborne on The Federalist, which has caused some controversy. She's not saying anything that others are not saying, but apparently the Federalist highlighted this story with a tweet, and Twitter told them to take the tweet down. Too incendiary, apparently. Oh, by the way, when you try to go to Zero Hedge now, you were given a dire warning, a suggesting that going to the Zero Hedge page will cripple your computer with viruses or some such. Anyway, this story is called Inaccurate Virus Models Are Panicking Officials into Ill-Advised Lockdowns. As U.S. state and local officials halt the economy and quarantine their communities over the Wuhan virus crisis, one would hope our leaders were making such major decisions based on well-sourced data and statistical analysis. That is not the case. A scan of statements made by media, state governors, local leaders, county judges, and more show many relying on the same source, an online mapping tool called COVID Act Now. The website says it is built to enable political leaders to quickly make decisions in their coronavirus response informed by best available data and modeling. An interactive map provides users a catastrophic forecast for each state should they wait to implement COVID Act Now's suggested strict measures to flatten the curve. But a closer look at how many of COVID Act Now's predictions have already fallen short and how they became a ubiquitous resource across the country overnight suggests something more sinister, or the plandemic, as some are calling it, or the sanitation dictatorship, as the good Bishop Athanasius Schneider calls it. When Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins announced a shelter-in-place order on Dallas County Sunday, he displayed COVID Act Now graphs with predictive outcomes after 3 months if certain drastic measures are taken. I suppose that, if they are taken. The NBC Dallas affiliate also embedded the COVID Act Now models in their story on the mandate. The headline of an NBC Oregon affiliate featured COVID Act Now data, and a headline blared, Coronavirus model sees Oregon hospitals overwhelmed by mid-April. Point of no return to be reached. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has cited it. Emory University professor urged Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia to follow the shutdown. Now, predictions already proved to be wildly wrong. COVID Act Now predicted that by March 19th, the state of Tennessee could expect 190 hospitalizations of patients with confirmed Wuhan virus. By March 19, they had only 15 patients hospitalized. In New York, COVID Act Now claimed nearly 5,400 New Yorkers would have been hospitalized by March 19. The actual number of hospitalizations is around 750. The site also claimed nearly 13,000 New York hospitalizations by March 23rd. The actual number was around 2,500. In Georgia, COVID Act Now predicted 688 hospitalizations by March 23. By that date, they had about 800 confirmed cases in the whole state and fewer than 300 hospitalized. In Florida, COVID Act Now predicted that by March 19, the state would face 400 hospitalizations. On March 19th, the governor said 90 people in Florida had been hospitalized. COVID Act Now's models in other states, including Oklahoma and Virginia, were also far off their predictions. Jordan Schachtel, a national security writer, said COVID Act Now's modeling comes from one team based at Imperial College London that is not only highly scrutinized, but has a track record of bad predictions. Schachtel has a Twitter stream on this, Tweetstorm. Their models come 100% from Imperial College UK projection that is coming under heavy scrutiny from scientific community. IC UK produced the famed doomsday scenario that guaranteed 2 million dead Americans. The man behind the projections is refusing to make his code public. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Jessica Hamzalu at New Scientist notes the systematic errors researchers and scientists have found with the modeling COVID Act relies on. Chen Shen at the New England Complex Systems Institute, a research group in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and his colleagues argued that the Imperial team's model is flawed and contains incorrect assumptions. They point out that the team's model doesn't account for the availability of tests or the possibility of superspreader events at gatherings and has other issues. Among those other issues, COVID Act Now lists the known limitations of their model. Here are a few that seem especially alarming. Many of the inputs into this model are based on early estimates that are likely to be wrong. Demographics, populations, and hospital bed counts are outdated. Demographics for the USA as a whole are used rather than specific to each state. The model does not adjust for population density, culturally determined interaction frequency and closeness, humidity, temperature, etc. in calculating R0. This is not a node-based analysis and thus assumes everyone spreads the disease at the same rate. So why is the organization or seemingly innocent online mapping tool using inaccurate algorithms to scaremonger leaders into tanking the economy? Politics, of course. Founders of the site include Democratic Representative Jonathan Christ Tompkins and 3 Silicon Valley tech workers and Democratic activists Zachary Rosen, Max Henderson, and Igor Kaufman, who are all also donors to various Democratic campaigns and political organizations since 2016. Henderson and Kaufman donated to the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016, while Rosen donated to the Democratic National Committee. Recently resigned Democratic Representative Katie Hill and other Democratic candidates. Prior to building the COVID Act Now website, Kaufman created an online game designed to raise $1 million for the eventual 2020 Democratic candidate and defeat President Trump. The game's website is now defunct. Perhaps the goal of COVID Act Now was never to provide accurate information, but to scare citizens and government officials into implementing rash and draconian measures. The creators even admit as much, with the caveat that this model is designed to drive fast action, not predict the future. They generated this model under the guise of protecting communities from overrun hospitals, a trend that is not on track as they predicted. Not only is the data false and looking more incorrect with each passing day, but the website is optimized for a disinformation campaign. A social media share button prompts users to share their models and alarming graphs on Facebook and Twitter with the autofill text, quote, "This is the point of no return for intervention to prevent X's hospital system from being overloaded by coronavirus." Faulty models, eh? Does that remind you of something else? Climate extinction, perhaps? Ooh, yes, our models show that any time now, I guess what is 11 years? Within 11 years, the Earth is going to be terraformed into Venus, and the seas are going to be boiling, and we're all gonna die. Well, as I've speculated before, I believe that one of the reasons for this sanitation dictatorship for the pandemic is because of the failure of the climate change hysteria to actually persuade people that we're all going to die. You know, as I like to say, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory? And so a model is used which predicts that real soon now, any day now, the dead bodies are going to be stacked up like cordwood. And despite what you may read on the Drudge Report, this is not happening. So, who is the person responsible for the model? Well, his name is Neil Ferguson. No, not that Neil Ferguson, a different Neil Ferguson. According to the Daily Beast 7 days ago, Professor Neil Ferguson, who warned that over 2 million Americans would die unless Trump changed course, is experiencing classic COVID-19 symptoms and went into self-isolation. Professor Neil Ferguson, whose terrifying Imperial College report has been cited by the White House and Downing Street, said this morning that he had come down with the classic symptoms of a persistent dry cough and fever. He was present at a press conference with Prime Minister Boris Johnson at Number 10 just 24 hours before his symptoms first appeared. Ferguson was the lead scientist on a report published Monday that said 2.2 million Americans and more than 500,000 Brits would be killed by the COVID-19 disease unless drastic steps were taken to halt the spread of the virus. In the days since the report was published, tens of thousands of bars, restaurants, schools, and theaters have been shuttered across the US and Britain, while the authors of the report have become cult social media heroes. While word of his analysis was racing around the world, Ferguson began to retreat from public life. That was probably a good move, considering what's happened. He said he felt the first signs of a cough on Tuesday morning during an interview with the Today Show on BBC Radio 4, just hours after Boris Johnson had radically altered the British government's coronavirus response after reading his report. So how do we get this? How do we get this? On March the 22nd, Ferguson, who apparently is not releasing his code, said, "I'm conscious that lots of people would like to see and run the pandemic simulation code we are using to model control measures against COVID-19. To explain the background, I wrote the code," get this, thousands of lines of undocumented C 13 plus years ago to model flu pandemics. I'm happy to say that Microsoft and GitHub are working with Imperial and MRC Outbreak to document, refactor, and extend the code to allow others to use without the multiple days training it would currently require. Yeah, okay. C code, thousands of lines, unchecked, 13 plus years ago. Well, that seems totally reliable, doesn't it? It's just, someone named Roko Midget commented 6 months later, a bug on line 3471 caused the model to overestimate deaths by a factor of 100. The lockdown was unnecessary. But by being in C, we got a 50% performance boost. Again, more from Jordan Schachtel. Their models, which in retrospect have proved inaccurate, promise total healthcare system catastrophe if states did not enact immediate draconian measures to supposedly stop the spread of the virus. They are both providing junk data and pushing their solutions to the issue. Yes, one would think that there would be a wall there. Okay, here's the data, and then other people can come up with the policy recommendations or demands, as it turns out. Oh, yeah, the question that I've been wondering about, celebrities. How come so many of them have got the coronavirus? And how was it so easy for them to get testing at a time when it was very difficult for others to get testing? Well, an interesting tweet from just Loki, or Loki Julianus. For folks who are wondering why so many celebrities seem like they are losing it, supply got hit. Stem cells. Yeah. Coronavirus China, potential stem cell injections breakthrough. Stem cell research was much hyped a decade ago as the miracle cure for degenerative diseases like Parkinson's. But things turned sour when the therapy became mired in controversy over the use of stem cells derived from the fetuses of aborted babies. Embryonic stem cells quickly became a divisive and highly politicized issue in the US. Dr. Wu and Dr. Melling said that since their breakthrough, the Chinese government has approved and fast-tracked clinical trials for the treatment, and Dr. Wu's company, Wuhan Hamilton Biotechnology Limited, has already received more than 5 million Chinese yuan in government funding to begin research protocols, with more money expected to come in. So I suppose the suggestion is that celebrities are using stem cells in order to stop aging or reverse aging. Dr. Wu said he has 400 doses of stem cells stockpiled in Wuhan, and another 400 could be manufactured within 3 weeks to help tackle the coronavirus pandemic. BHI, which has offices in Europe and the Caribbean, also has plans in place for international expansion to make the coronavirus treatment available to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Oh, in other words, we brought you the disease. Now we're going to cure the disease. I don't know. I don't like that bet. I don't like that bet at all. It's too funny. It is absolutely too funny. So let's check on the chat. Okay, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to 0, says MCT, and this is absolutely correct. Madonna, who we now learn is actually Chinese, was moaning in her bathtub a couple of days ago that the coronavirus doesn't care how old you are. Well, actually, it cares very much how old you are, because coronavirus is a form of influenza, and influenza is much, much, much more deadly to old people, particularly very old people, than it is to younger people. Okay. Yes, Greta Thunberg is claiming to have coronavirus, says Changokin666. Coronavirus for celebrities is the new Lyme disease. What, you don't have Lyme disease? What kind of celebrity are you? U.S. is going to pass Italy in a few days. Okay, well, the United States is a much bigger country than Italy is, so I would not be surprised. Bernard Brightson says Scott Adams is absolutely sure that celebrities, billionaires, and the doctors themselves are put on the anti-malaria medicine as soon as symptoms presents itself, that is before the tests come back. All right, that may be so. Okay, someone named, okay, the special pleaders, the rent seekers, are now out in force. Someone called Marine Faruqi, oh, she is a senator. She's an Australian. And she is a senator for the Green Party. Of course, she is for New South Wales. She describes herself as a feminist, engineer, and migrant. And migrants are the bestest people on earth. They're better than us. They're so much more hardworking and entrepreneurial. So we should listen to what they have to say very closely. She says COVID-19 is a gendered crisis. Nurses, nurse aides, teachers, child carers, and early childhood educators, aged care workers, and cleaners are mostly women. They are on the front line of this public health crisis and carry a disproportionate risk of being exposed to the virus. This woman, there's a video here of her speaking, and she is wearing this extraordinary outfit. It's not quite leopard skin, but there's sort of an insert to cover her bra, and it is green and yellow, these little blobs. And she has a choker, a purple choker around her neck. Absolutely extraordinary. And of course, the message here, as always, is everyone on earth to die, women hardest hit. This woman has been hit quite hard, ratioed, as the kids are saying, because the statistics show that men are dying significantly more from coronavirus than women are. But, facts never stopped feminism before, so why should they do so now? Okay, President Trump said a couple of days ago that if this panic continues much longer, the shutdown, that we're going to have suicides. Well, the suicides have started coming in, and it looks like in terms of causes of death in the ratings, that suicide is going to be soaring. Here's a story from the London Sun. Beautiful and charming teenager 19 killed herself as she couldn't face coronavirus isolation. A beautiful teen who feared being isolated with coronavirus tragically died after attempting to take her own life. That's a very strange construction because she did take her own life. Tributes have now been paid to funny and charming Emily Owen, 19, who died in hospital after suicide attempt. Now, my standards are pretty high in this regard. Medias want to describe various women as beautiful when they are not. This woman actually was truly beautiful. The young waitress was said to have been unable to cope with her world closing in, plans being canceled, and being stuck inside. Her devastated family tonight demanded more awareness and support for people struggling with mental health issues during the deadly virus pandemic. Emily from Kingsland, Norfolk, had warned loved ones day before the tragedy, more people will die from suicide during this than the virus itself. Well, she may well be right about that. Emily died in hospital Sunday after being found critically ill on Wednesday, March the 18th. Her family suspect the fear of the unknown may have driven her over the edge. This is a very, very sad story, and may God have mercy on her soul. Here's another story from the Mail. Italian nurse 34 kills herself after testing positive for coronavirus and worrying she had infected others. Daniela Trezzi was working at a hospital in the worst affected region of Lombardy. A nursing federation voiced its pain and dismay as it confirmed her death. The body said medical workers were suffering heavy stress from the crisis. I don't know. Again, all I can say, well, I have two things to say. One, first of all, may God have mercy on her soul. And second, is this going to be counted as an official coronavirus death in Italy? Because the way I understand it, anyone who dies and has the coronavirus is counted as a coronavirus death. The nursing group also revealed that a similar episode had happened a week ago in Venice with the same underlying reasons. Each of us has chosen this profession for good and unfortunately also for bad. We are nurses. The condition and stress to which our professionals are subjected to is under the eyes of all. The general manager of the San Geraldo Hospital, Mario Alperoni, said Daniela had been at home sick since March 10th and that she was not under surveillance. Figures released by an Italian research institute yesterday showed that some 5,760 health workers had been infected with a coronavirus. Oh, yes, and this has been compared to a war. Trump called it a war. Others called it a war. Let's see. Andrew Coyne, Canada's leading conservative, was talking about, the war in the Globe and Mail. I'm very suspicious of people who are using these martial metaphors all the time. And, oh, yes, there's certain advantages to being a war. It shows us how great big government is. Well, I've always wondered about that because it's the government who's ordering you to go out and get killed, But everyone has to pull together. And if you don't pull together, you will feel the lash of the whip. This is from the New York Post. Police in India use force on coronavirus lockdown violators. Dramatic photos and videos show how police across India are using extreme force. Baton-wielding cops wearing surgical masks. Isn't that the perfect picture of this phony panic? Baton-wielding cops wearing surgical masks. Yes, the sanitation dictatorship shock troops thereof can be seen in the images and footage from Wednesday beating those breaking the rules. On Tuesday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced a 21-day national lockdown to stem the spread of the potentially deadly virus. Potentially deadly? Sounds like virus denialism. And yes, we are actually hearing about virus denialism now. We got softened up with climate change deniers, and now we're on to virus deniers. The Prime Minister of India declared no one will be allowed to leave their homes. To save India, to save its every citizen, that's unrealistic. You, your family, every street, every neighborhood is being put under lockdown. Alok Barman, a houseworker who works in South Delhi homes, said he was beaten by cops when he went outside his home into the city's outskirts. Some homes that I work in paid me some money, and I thought it was best to get some food in the house, but the police attacked us with sticks and beat us. Now we have nothing to eat. Another local, Tariq Anwar, said he went out to buy milk and vegetables at a grocery store in Delhi's Jamia Nagar neighborhood, but was stopped by police who ordered him to go home. You know, when I first started writing for magazine, I was told never to use the word local or locals in a story, and I was given a little rhyme in order to remember this injunction. Locals rhymes with yokels. You will see instead now the phrase much mocked by The Onion, area man. So let's see, is there something else from India? Oh, okay. Currently in the Punjab, if you break the government-imposed curfew, the police are forcing you to do squats while chanting, "We are enemies of society." And my comment was, British and Canadian politicians and media look on in envy. From Bloomberg, Italy may set heavier fines for coronavirus lockdown violations. The government there may impose fines of up to 3,000 euros for violations of a nationwide lockdown as the country struggles to counter Europe's worst coronavirus outbreak. A cabinet meeting chaired by Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte later Tuesday is expected to approve the fines and police powers to seize the vehicles of anyone caught violating the restrictions, which ban movements inside the country and shutter almost all industrial production, according to people familiar with the matter who declined to be named discussing confidential deliberations. The current fine for violations is 206 euros. The cabinet is also planning to approve a measure allowing for the extension of different levels of lockdown up to July 31st, if circumstances should warrant it. Well, I guess there won't be an economy in Italy by that time if they keep this up, and there may no longer be even a society. Oh, okay. So, Italy had Mussolini, right? And Italy has had its struggles with democracy, representative government. But what about the cradle of representative government, the mother of parliaments, that is to say, Britain? Surely they are not going to be cowed, are they? Well, here's a story from the London Sun. British Transport Police deployed to rail network to enforce ban on unnecessary travel during lockdown. Oi, mate, you got a license for that trip? 500 transport cops are patrolling the UK's rail network tonight to enforce the PM's coronavirus travel clampdown. They have been tasked with making sure passengers know only those making essential journeys for work should now be using the tube and trains. Sean O'Callaghan, Assistant Chief Constable at British Transport Police, said the measures announced yesterday by the Prime Minister are there to save lives, which is part of the work our officers do every day. No, actually, you're more interested in mean tweets. We are supporting rail operators and those key workers making their journeys home tonight by deploying 500 officers. They will be patrolling stations, supporting railway staff, and reminding the public of the urgent need to follow the government advice. Only those making essential journeys should be using the tube and rail network. We strongly urge the rest of the public to do the right thing and help us save lives by staying at home and slowing the spread of the virus. Earlier today, we told how Londoners rammed tube services across the capital less than 12 hours after Boris Johnson ordered Brits to stay home to stop coronavirus. And I'm just kind of curious, but by what authority is Boris Johnson able to do this? It's one of those special circumstances, one of those emergencies of which Carl Schmitt wrote. So force majeure, all bets are off, etc., etc. Let's see. Oh, okay. Apparently there are still some resistors in England, and I am glad to see that. The Daily Mail, which has become really authoritarian of late, although the Mail on Sunday is still publishing Peter Hitchens and still allows him to have a blog. You call that exercise? Britons are still flouting the lockdown, with police now using loud hailers to tell sunbathers to go home, while families who have lost loved ones to coronavirus beg the public to take shutdown seriously. Footage shows police dispersing members of the public intent on flouting the government's lockdown rules. Police dispersed members of the public soaking up the sun in Shepherd's Bush in West London. Groups of people were pictured enjoying the good weather in part of Cheltenham on Wednesday. UK's coronavirus death toll stands at 437 Wednesday, with more than 8,200 cases of the virus. 8,200 cases. That does not sound to me like the end of the world. Shoppers have also been pictured continuing to squeeze together at supermarkets across the country. The Prince of Wales has tested positive and is in self-isolation at his home at the Balmoral estate in Scotland. And the Mail has provided, the Mail is very good with photography, I must say. I don't know of any other newspaper in the world which uses photography as well as the Mail. So let's see, pictures of Manchester. People in Piccadilly Gardens in Manchester, they're on the street talking to each other, and there seems to be some hand-holding here, and the 2-meter rule not being enforced. We have Dottie and Lulu enjoying the water in Eastbourne. People are walking in Battersea Park, and there are 2 women doing yoga or some such thing on the grass. Members of the public on the seafront in Portsmouth today. And again, there appears to be a few people here who are not abiding by the 2-meter rule. More pictures from Piccadilly Gardens in Manchester, and we have some people enjoying the sun on the grass. Shocking behavior. But it's nice to see that the life force has not been completely extirpated in England. Paul Joseph Watson reports, police were called after a neighbor spotted 2 brothers playing soccer in their own backyard, in another example of how the country's lockdown is being ruthlessly patrolled. Sounds like a totalitarian police state, says John Betts. Yes, it is a totalitarian police state. And yeah, Mike Tracy, he apparently wishes that Trump were a fascist dictator, because Michael Tracy, I seem to be a rather sensible fellow, but apparently fascist dictators, they get the job done. Longing for the crack of the whip. More from Britain. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. You ever heard that song? Rule Britannia? It just seems deeply ironic now. I'll read the lyrics. When Britain first at heaven's command arose from out the azure main, arose from out the azure main, there was the charter of the land, and guardian angels sang this strain. Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. The nations not so blessed as thee must in their turn to tyrants fall, while thou shalt flourish great and free, the dread and envy of them all. Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never, never shall be slaves. Yeah, at least until Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister. Again from the Mail, emergency powers allowing police to hand out £1,000 fines to anyone refusing a coronavirus test, and ministers to ban public mass gatherings have become law today after being rushed through Parliament in just 3 days. So, the changes include reducing the number of doctors required to sign off on sectioning those with mental health issues from 2 to 1. Oh, it's kind of like the good old Soviet Union. While police would be given authority to force those infected with COVID-19 to self-isolate with the threat of 4-figure fines for refusing to be tested. The unprecedented legislation granting ministers, councils, police, health professionals, and coroners wide-ranging powers that are due to last for up to 2 years had already cleared the Commons in one sitting. Don't want to waste too much time debating about instituting totalitarianism. After all, the experts, would anyone dare to disagree with Imperial College? I mean, that sounds like treason. They have a model. They have thousands of lines of unchecked C code from 13 plus years ago. Oh, the NHS. New rules to ensure that health workers working outside their area of expertise are not sued if they make a mistake. More court cases to be held using video or audio links. Yeah, there's not necessary for people to actually show up to trials. No inquests with juries if the coroner thinks the death was due to coronavirus. This is what they call a murderer's charter. Oh, coronavirus. Ugh, what about those stab wounds in the back? It was coronavirus. Stop being treasonous. Slashing red tape to ensure people can be discharged from hospital much more quickly. Relaxing rules to make it easier to dispose of dead bodies. Well, there's protocol about the disposition of dead bodies because one has to be very careful about that, lest one spread disease and or contaminate water sources. Yes. Okay, so moving on. Yes, I mentioned Michael Tracy already. These are exact words he used. I'm glad Trump isn't a fascist, contrary to the nonstop screaming claims made about him, but a committed fascist would probably do a much better job handling an infectious disease outbreak. Yes, also, I suppose, getting the trains to run on time. So, is there any reason in this world gone mad? Well, the unlikely voice of reason here appears to be Sweden, of all places. And the Mail is not very happy about this. While most of Europe is firmly locked down in a bid to curb the spread of COVID-19, Sweden is taking a softer line, keeping primary schools, restaurants, and bars open, and even encouraging people to go outside for a nip of air. How grossly irresponsible. This stands in stark contrast to the urgent tone elsewhere and has sparked heated debate whether Sweden is really doing the right thing. The country has reported more than 2,299 confirmed cases of the coronavirus and 41 deaths. 41 deaths in, what are we looking at now? 3 months? Doesn't seem like a lot of deaths to me. We cannot allow the human desperation in Wuhan and Bergamo to be repeated in Sweden. That would be a gamble that violates society's most fundamental principle that every person has an inherent value, the editor-in-chief of Sweden's biggest newspaper, Dagens Nyheter, wrote on Sunday, calling for either tougher measures or more widespread coronavirus testing. Yes, well, the media has spoken, and the Mail has provided, here's a bar graph, and here is a park with lots and lots and lots of people sitting next to each other. What the cherry blossoms are in bloom, a very beautiful scene in Stockholm, and again, thronged with people. Some men enjoying beer at a bar. I don't know. Looks pretty chill to me. Let's see. As soon as the Public Health Agency requests that the government make a decision, we will do it quickly, Health Minister Lena Hallengren, snapping her fingers, said earlier this month. But not everyone shares the government's faith in the health agency, with some accusing it of putting lives at risk. This has led to a stream of vitriol on social media directed at the agency and its main spokesperson, state epidemiologist Anders Tegnell. The amount of hateful comments became so overwhelming that the agency's director, Johan Carlson, felt compelled to defend Tegnell, saying, "I think it's close to unworthy what he has been subjected to." The mounting pressure from whom, the usual suspects, has not changed the authorities' stance that draconian measures. You see, generally, throughout recorded history, draconian measures associated with the Greek dictator Draco, draconian measures are bad. Now, draconian measures are good. And who dare stand against draconian measures? On Monday, Sweden's former state epidemiologist and current advisor to the World Health Organization, Johan Giesecke, encouraged Swedes to go out and enjoy the spring sun. Bring a friend and walk a meter apart. Don't hug your neighbor. Bring a thermos and sit on a park bench. It's bad for your health to sit at home, too. Right or wrong, Sweden does not seem to have a worse virus problem than its neighbors, according to the numbers of declared cases. I mentioned 2299, while Norway and Denmark, which each have about half the population of Sweden, reported 2,566 and 1,577, respectively. All Scandinavian countries are, however, believed to have a big number of unknown cases, as testing is only being done on patients with severe syndromes. Yes, of course. But this number does not work to the panic mongers' advantage, as I've explained earlier. Imagine that we discovered that, there were 1 million confirmed cases of coronavirus in Canada. Well, then the number of deaths would look absolutely paltry. And this would appear that the whole thing was, a hoax. So no, I don't think that the widespread testing is going to work out for the people behind the pandemic the way that they think it is. I don't think that this false narrative can be maintained for much longer. I mean, the elite is going to maintain it. There's no question about that. What are they going to say? We crashed the economy. The economy is now a smoldering crater in the ground, and we needlessly terrorized hundreds of millions of people. Yeah, they're not going to say that, because that would lead to what political scientists call a pre-revolutionary situation. That the government would lie to us, would fly to absurd conclusions, and would continue to hold on to those absurd conclusions even after the evidence keeps coming in. I believe it was about 2 weeks ago, I said that, unless the bodies start being stacked like cordwood, the dead bodies, real soon now, this is going to look ridiculous. So what's happening in the United States? Mayor Garcetti announces water and power will be shut off for non-essential LA businesses that don't close. Non-essential businesses. Isn't that wonderful, the way that the government gets to decide what is an essential business and what is a non-essential business? Much like I suspect, the government is going to soon claim the right to define what is an essential life and what is a non-essential life. The mayor addressed President Trump's remarks from earlier Tuesday about having the nation opened up and just ready to go by Easter. Garcetti said he didn't think LA would be back to normal in that short time. We won't extend it one day longer than we need to, Garcetti said, but emphasized that the safer at home measure had to be followed through. The mayor said LA is 6 to 12 days behind New York in being hit with a wave of positive cases. The peak is not here yet. It will be bad. Well, I was particularly interested in how this was going to hit Los Angeles and San Francisco, given that they have a long-standing public health crisis there with homelessness, urine, feces everywhere, discarded needles. One would think that Los Angeles and San Francisco, if COVID-19 were as virulent as people are saying, that you would see devastation in those cities. But apparently, no, not yet, anyway. So what does Vox Day think? I'm going to read something that he wrote yesterday. This could be, how would I put it, sort of syntactical incompetence on his part, but it is alarming nonetheless. You may have read about a story of a priest in Italy, a 72-year-old priest who gave his respirator to a younger COVID-19 patient he did not know has died from coronavirus. Father Giuseppe Berardelli, the main priest in the town of Casnigo, refused a respirator which had been bought for him by his parishioners and instead gave it to a younger patient. He died last week in Bergamo, one of the worst-hit cities in Italy's ongoing coronavirus crisis, Lovere, Bergamo, or Lovere. He was a simple, straightforward person with a great kindness and helpfulness towards everyone, believers and non-believers, Giuseppe Imberti, the mayor of Casnigo, said in a statement. Although there was no funeral for the priest, residents of the town reportedly applauded from their balconies as his coffin was taken for burial. Vox Day comments, meanwhile, a reader from Florida writes, grocery stores in Florida have enacted a special early shopping time for elderly shoppers. Of course, elderly is now considered 65 and up. Boomers line up in the hundreds, ignoring social distancing, boo, and go through the store like a plague of locusts. Forget women and children, gotta give the boomers first dibs. Vox Day comments, typical, all too typical. Because God hates the wicked, it is good to hate the boomer. As with Father Giuseppe, there can be little doubt about what God they serve. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. Because God hates the wicked, it is good to hate the boomer. As with Father Giuseppe, there can be little doubt about what God they serve. So is he calling for boomer genocide, or claiming that all priests are wicked, or both? He says the contrast demonstrates that being a boomer is more than just a range of temporal mileage. It is more importantly a state of soul. The contrast, the use of the word contrast, suggests that he's attempting to differentiate between your general boomer who should die right now because you're all gammas, and Father Giuseppe. But Father Giuseppe is a boomer as well at 72. So the clear implication is that all boomers must die. Once again, because they're gammas. And gammas do not deserve to live. Suffer not a gamma to live. I believe that's in the Bible somewhere. Let's see. Going back to the chat, NWO Games Alert says the tests are completely unreliable, according to many German specialists. Google Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg, sadly the only one with a video with English subtitles. Yes, I quoted from him, I believe yesterday, when we were talking about that Off Guardian article, about the 12 skeptical medical professionals. Bernard Breitson said, I would never clap at a funeral or at the site of a funeral casket. Well, yes, just so. But the Catholic Church, in its wisdom, has decided that, no, we can't have funerals anymore. See, that's one of the 7 sacraments, and the Church doesn't believe in the sacraments anymore. Lecomte de Boreas says this time last year, U.S. had a higher annual mortality rate than in the last 2 months. Well, you see, the elite is going to say that shutting down society and cratering the economy is responsible for this. But if if that's the case, then just end the isolation now, because the numbers just don't justify it. Jaco Rapala says there's no testing because Scandinavian countries can't produce test masks or any other medical supplies. All the industry was shut down and everything is just bought from China now. Yes, people might want to ask their elected representatives, how did we allow this to happen? Why did Canada send an enormous shipment of such medical supplies to China just before this all broke out? Of course, get also asked the question, why was Canada sending viruses to China late last year? Yeah, it's true. And apparently one of the leading scientists at this Canadian clinic was frog marched out of the institution, Chinese fellow, last autumn. Let's see, again from NWO Games Alert, many German doctors say there is nothing out of the ordinary, no more death than usual, and condemn the hysterical. Ned Rock said Draco suggested death penalty for stealing a cabbage. Well, people were executed in Britain up until, into the 18th century for stealing loaves of bread. If they were lucky, they were, sent off to Australia. Again, from our Finnish correspondent, people just started dying in Sweden, so it's more like 40 deaths in a couple of days than in a couple of months, 10 in a day now. I think they are right, but there's going to be lots of dead. The question is there going to be any more deaths than there normally are? That is the big question. It's the one that I've been asking from the very beginning. Because the planted axiom here is that, well, no, it's not like there was a new strain of influenza every year, sickening hundreds of thousands or millions of people and killing thousands of people. The pretense was, no, oh my God, this is something new, something novel. See, it's a novel coronavirus. Bernard Bryson says in today's live stream, Michael Tracy was in despair over people not self-quarantining themselves, but enjoying themselves outside in his neighborhood. I suppose I understand that. You were so terrified that you were literally afraid to leave your house. And by leaving your house, I mean, like, say, walking around in the parking lot or just, walking up and down the block. And you saw people who were doing this. I don't know, it might make you feel silly or even ashamed. The less sun, the more immunodeficient, says Chogokin666. Yes, this is absolutely right. Divid the Gnome says, I think you can get away with anything in England if you just create a sort of ad hoc gay parade for all the police to dance in. Yes. Lecomte de Boreas says, let's do the quick math. 280,000 new viruses, 2 trillion on new money. Yeah. Let's look at the market here. Dow jumps more than 2% post first back-to-back gain since February. The Dow has jumped more than 13% in 2 days as the White House and congressional leaders said they had agreed to a massive stimulus bill to combat the economic slowdown from the coronavirus pandemic. The 30-stock average climbed more than 2%, or 496 points, to 21,200 on Wednesday. This 20,000 number seems to be very important psychologically. Stocks came off their highs in the final minutes of trading after Senator Bernie Sanders said he was prepared to put a hold on this bill until stronger conditions are imposed on the $500 billion corporate welfare fund. Yeah, do we got any more details about that? I see that Boeing was up $31.05 today, which is an increase of 24.3%. So one of the worst, most incompetent companies in America is going to be bailed out. What the taxpayers aren't going to get a chunk of the company. And, I've suggested that if these companies take the money, then their leadership, the corporate leadership who is responsible for wrecking these companies should be forced to take part in, ritual abasement. But no, it doesn't look like that is going to happen. Apple drops after report says company considers delaying next iPhone launch. That's an odd business model that Apple has. You like your phone? Yeah, I like my phone. It's great. We are coming out with a new phone. A new phone? A new phone? What's it got? Oh, well, I don't know. It's marginally better. It's like 2-3% better. I'm going to stand in line for days to get this phone. This phone is junk. I need the new iPhone. So in America, in Canada, and much of the West, we have known for years that there is a large proportion of the population that does not have enough money to withstand any kind of economic crisis. Something bad happened, they wouldn't have enough money to make their rent or perhaps even to buy food. Well, we're there now. But meanwhile, Apple, you got to have the new phone. You got to have the new phone. Well, perhaps one of the good things that will come out of the Wu flu is that people will decide that they don't really need to replace their phones on such a regular basis. It is not the acme or the zenith of humiliation having a smartphone that's a year or two old. I was forced by circumstances, specifically by demands from Twitter and PayPal, to get a mobile phone, which I got in June. I had gone through all this time. I got all the way to 2019 without ever having a cellular phone. But this was pretty much demanded of me. So I broke down and, oh my God, my phone, I got it in June. It's been superseded by something. I feel this tremendous desire to get a new phone. No, actually, I don't. And I think that this phone will suit me just fine. This is a very disturbing story from CNBC by Christina Farr. Pregnant medical workers are making hard decisions about whether to treat COVID-19 patients in person. Hospitals are making their own decisions about how to handle pregnant staffers and whether to transition them to telemedicine. Some medical experts fear that contracting the coronavirus while pregnant could leave women vulnerable to severe respiratory problems such as pneumonia. For pregnant healthcare workers like Dr. Sonia Singh in Houston, circumstances are all the more frightening, given general uncertainty about whether they're at greater risk of getting sick from the virus. Dr. Singh, an internist at Memorial Hermann Health System, is 33 weeks pregnant. Along with her fellow pregnant doctors and nurses across the country, she is working without clear guidelines on whether she should continue to see patients, although her hospital has encouraged her to switch to virtual consultations where possible. She says she's avoiding in-person meetings with people experiencing respiratory issues and has been very concerned about bringing the virus home. She's even removed her wedding ring because it's one less that can be contaminated. About 80 to 90% of her visits now are virtual. I feel some guilt that I can't see my patients like I normally would, said Dr. Singh, who has a cleaning station in her home garage for when she or her husband, who's a critical care doctor and a pulmonologist, return for the day. Well, you see that medicine is no longer a calling. It is simply a job. And the motto of such jobs is sauve qui peut. Every man for himself, every woman for herself. Save yourself if you can. I talked last night about Justin Trudeau and his coup attempt, which failed. Mandatory quarantines for international travelers kick in at midnight. Oh, a little late in the day, isn't it? Why are we having international travelers, by the way, especially from infection hot spots? Um, so the mandatory quarantines. What price stigmatization now? Huh? We weren't supposed to do that, you know? Politico has noticed our prime minister. Canada turns inward as pandemic surges within and beyond its borders. It's not surging. It's not surging. Justin Trudeau was long the anti-Trump when it came to borders, once telling refugees in a tweet that Canada's doors were wide open and advocating for a revamped North American free trade deal that would allow cross-border commerce to flourish. But in the age of the coronavirus, it's Canada's first. Like many of its like-minded allies in Europe, Canada is turning inward as the virus cases continue to multiply worldwide, and especially in the United States. Asylum seekers are now being turned back to the U.S. from the irregular crossings between brick and mortar ports of entry that dot the 5,525-mile-long border. They're not alone. Travelers from both countries can no longer dash across the invisible line for cheaper beer or to see friends who live a few miles away but in another country. Yes, and Trudeau has left this really rather late. All this posturing, about stigmatization, xenophobia, all of that stuff. Trudeau decided that apparently you could have the House of Commons without MPs, because why would you let's have votes, unanimous consent votes, when there's nobody there, and never let a crisis go to waste. I'm looking at stories here from National Newswatch, which is Canada's version of Drudge. It is very lefty. It's very liberal friendly. It's sort of like a fan page for the Liberal Party. Canada is getting a bailout, and guess who's getting bailed out again? The media. Yeah, that's right. They got $595 million from the Trudeau government last year, or a fund was made available. And, it means effectively that's state-run media, right? Well, it's pretty much been state-run media in Canada for quite some time now, for this reason. That the newspapers, TV stations, radio stations are, as they say, vertically integrated. They're typically owned by telcos. And the telcos live or die by decisions made by Canadian regulatory agencies. So it is rare to find media outlets in Canada who are opposed to the government of the day, for the reason that they don't want to piss off the people in charge. Jen Gerson of Maclean's, silly woman. I recall, she's still touchy about this. There was a shocking election in 2015 in Alberta where the New Democratic Party, the Socialist Party, Workers' Party as they used to be, Faculty Club Party more like now, they defeated the Progressive Conservative government, which had run Alberta since, 1971? Yeah, permanent government, one-party state. So she wrote a piece for the National Post, and it was the election had been called, and it was sort of overview of the election and blah, blah, blah. Well, the Conservatives are going to win. It's just a question of how much they win by. Well, you see, as Chris Berman used to say, that's why they play the game. And it is not the job of reporters to tell people that the election is pointless, because we all know who's going to win. Anyway, apparently Jen is very upset about what's happening now. As I have said, I should mention before I read from this, that the Chief Health Officer of the province of New Brunswick, and the province of New Brunswick has been absolutely devastated by the Wu flu. They have 18 cases. Yeah, that's right. They have 18 cases, and 18 cases and no deaths. And she said, we're looking at 18 to 24 months of the shutdown. Well, that's the price of matriarchy, which is eternal hysteria. So, Jen, I presume that's short for Jennifer, writes, at moments of crisis, people like myself have to watch what we write. Once my role was to offer a candid and catchy perspective on the world. Now I ought to provide comforting platitudes intended to soothe my readers into complacency and compliance. Why? Really? Flatten the curve. Sing on your balconies. We're all in this together. Harken back to the promise of the old golden status quo. That sentence doesn't mean anything. We're in for a tough few months, but everything will go back to normal. But when big things like COVID-19 happen, and September 11th, 2001 is the only analogy I can draw from my own lifetime, there is no return to normal. There's just the beginning of a new normal. I suspect this pandemic is going to force us all into a fundamental renegotiation of the social contract. And whether that debate leads to a better world or a worse one will depend on how we respond today. The pandemic ahead of us is terrifying. The virus itself is insidiously canny. Yeah, they call this the pathetic fallacy. Almost as if designed to test every thread of social cohesion. It's deadly, but not deadly enough to frighten everyone equally. Its high morbidity rate, really? Does it have such a high morbidity rate? Puts a strain on already overburdened healthcare systems. It's already revealed the fissures in our political leadership around the world. It's remarkably durable and contagious because it appears to be able to spread asymptomatically. The virus offers no clear warnings about when its victims must withdraw from society. We all seem to understand now our collective duty to flatten the curve of the outbreak. By dramatically reducing our social contacts, we are meant to slow the transmission of the disease, giving our healthcare systems time to respond. Most of us have even seen a simple graph intended to illustrate the point. The very concept of social distancing itself seems to comprise different prohibitions in different jurisdictions. We are told paradoxically that distancing is a minor convenience that we should be able to manage easily and gratefully, and also that we face hardships and sacrifices not seen since the Second World War. Those who adopt the rhetoric of noble self-sacrifice gloss over the historical realities of that endlessly romanticized era. Look, to compare what's going on now to the Second World War is absolutely fatuous, and anyone who does so should be ashamed, should be shamed publicly. And I really am looking forward to this. There has to be a reckoning. In times of extreme crisis, it becomes our obligation as journalists to offer governments the benefit of the doubt. Does it? Managing this pandemic would be difficult for any government, and many thousands of lives are at stake. The unwritten contract suggests that this is a moment to blunt ordinary criticism in the name of broader social cohesion. So, you see, it's really obvious. The government says there's a crisis, an unprecedented crisis, and so, okay, we're just going to take away all your freedoms, and we can expect the patriotic media to say, well, come on, what else are you going to do? And she talks about the coup attempt by Justin Trudeau. And she says the opposition was correct to object and to object strenuously. I will leave it to others to explain why the Liberals' move was so egregious and inappropriate. For my part, the attempt fundamentally shook my faith in this government's ability to handle this crisis at a moment when that faith is required. How could we trust a government to declare the Emergency Act and potentially exercise the draconian measures therein? Note to self, draconian measures, not a bad thing, now a good thing. If they're already engaging in this kind of political chicanery, the crisis has only just begun. Okay, yeah. We've had a good, long 70-year run in the West, but this is the end of that golden age. It's not fair to demand sacrifice from the many without offering some hope of a better world on the other side. A better world on the other side? That's the way that people used to talk about heaven. But I guess the state is now our God. And our God, according to Jen Gerson, seems to be failing us. Why have you abandoned us? state, Abba, Father. These people have been lecturing us for years about this, about globalism, neoliberalism, the New World Order, that the experts are in charge. And you people who think that this is not called for, that it is counterproductive, restrictive of our liberties, that the middle class is being hollowed out in order to benefit the 1%, well, you're bad people, because the experts have it in hand. And now these same people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Okay, Great Lakes Nationalist says people still have the average attention span of 10-year-olds. The virus panic will be forgotten by most within 3 months of it ending. It will fade to the status of an annoying hiccup softened by Netflix binge watching. Well, YouTube, I see, has sort of their mandatory 480p now. And that's definitely, not going to be great for that whole experience. YT says, absolutely. People are talking about how it'll change their lives and their way of life. How stupid do you have to be? What is going on with people that everyone gives into hysterics? Well, there was a balancing act being played by the elite governments, by the financial sector, that we've embarked on this experiment of prosperity without productivity. And it requires certain things, such as, zero interest rates, ZIRP, forever. Now, the governments of the United States, Canada, Britain, et cetera, have decided to drive their economies over a cliff. Oh, and we'll get roaring. I've already seen this. Well, it's going to be great because, after all the disaster, well, there's going to be a boom, just like there was after the Second World War. Henry Hazlitt, the American economist, exposed this particular view of the world, saying, okay, if it's that easy, well, why don't we just build a whole bunch of things? Like build a whole bunch of ships, massive ships, and then tow them out to sea and then sink them. I mean, clearly, destruction means wealth. Okay, let's, so the New World, apparently the New World that we're entering into, it means springing prisoners. That's the thing to do. Because maybe they expand the economy, the GDP. Well, actually, I'm sure they do. When one looks at insurance and one looks at the contributions to the economy made by lawyers, prosecutors, judges, social workers, jailers, etc. From the New York Post, Ilhan Omar wants to release prisoners, ICE detainees as coronavirus outbreak spreads. She has come up with what she calls a radical idea. The Minnesota Progressive suggested that the U.S. needs a moratorium on incarcerating people who are low risk to others, as well as an increase in medical staff in prison and jails as the virus causes a national crisis and economic catastrophe. Incarcerated individuals deserve our humanity too, she argued in a tweet. Later that night, she tweeted on another suggestion, one she recognized could be considered radical. Here's maybe a radical idea to deal with some of the pressures our healthcare system is facing. All private hospitals should be made public for the duration of the virus. So we are looking at these same people who are talking about healthcare services being overwhelmed are saying all private hospitals should be made public for the duration of the virus. Again, another example of the cognitive dissonance of the left. On Tuesday, Omar authored a letter to House leadership calling for protections for refugees, immigrants, and those seeking asylum to be included in a future coronavirus legislation. We request an additional $350 million in migration and refugee assistance funds for the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration within the State Department, as well as an additional $462 million in refugee and entrant assistance funds from the Office of Refugee Settlement within the Department of Health and Human Services. This funding is critical to ensuring that recent refugee and special immigrant arrivals receive direct assistance such as cash and medical assistance, housing, rent, utilities, transportation, food, and health needs unavailable through normally operating public channels. So yeah, let's bring in all of these people who can't look after themselves at a time when, you know, people who are actually born here can't look after themselves because the economy has been deliberately cratered. And let's shower all these goodies on it. As they say, America, what a country. Of course, it's no different in my country. It's certainly no different in Britain. So New York seems to have a similar idea. This is from Zero Hedge. And again, I'll repeat that apparently when this happened to me. I clicked on a link and I was told that I was taking a very severe risk in following through to the Zero Hedge page. In the latest example of outside-the-box thinking from America's favorite mayor, Bill de Blasio, whose city is being ravaged by the coronavirus and is slowly becoming the epicenter for the outbreak in the U.S., decided to release inmates from jail. Approximately 300 inmates were released from Rikers Island and other city facilities this week in an attempt to, drumroll, stop the virus spread, because apparently confining potential COVID carriers in a closed space is more risky than letting them frolic among the general population. Perhaps de Blasio missed the part where prisoners are already in quarantine, even if one gets the virus. We wonder if New York residents forced to live under quarantine indefinitely will appreciate the latest stroke of brilliance from the New York City mayor, who has worked for his entire tenure to decriminalize, well, crime. The mayor continued, I'm saying across the entire population, it is imperative to me that anyone over 70 and anyone who has one of the 5 pre-existing conditions should be released as well. There are a lot of New York City prisoners over 70. As Ernest van den Haag once explained to me that you don't see very many criminals, violent criminals anyway, over the age of 45 because testosterone levels in men have dropped dramatically by that time. That said, don't accuse de Blasio of not having a backbone. De Blasio was apparently not yet comfortable releasing those locked up for domestic violence and sexual offenses, but in a day or two, or well, who knows? Something tells us this idea is going to poll about as well as de Blasio did during the Democratic primaries. On the other hand, maybe once these inmates are released, de Blasio can hire several hundred city officials to form a task force that ensures the criminals use hand sanitizer when they jump subway turnstiles. So apparently this radical idea has spread to Canada as well. Release low-risk prisoners to prevent COVID-19 outbreak, say advocates calling for immediate action. This is from the Hill Times. Keeping the estimated 14,000 inmates housed in close confines is a matter of life and death, given the terribly contagious virus, said NDP MP Jack Harris of Newfoundland, while independent Ontario Senator Kim Pate said she's extremely concerned with the approach the Correctional Service of Canada is taking by solely focusing on hygiene methods and social distancing within the institutions. As it turns out, I once had a fairly lengthy interview with Senator Kim Pate. Let's see, she was born in 1959. She graduated from Dalhousie Law School in 1984. In 2014, she was named a member of the Order of Canada. She was a longtime executive director of the Elizabeth Fry Society, which is the sort of the female version of the John Howard Society. It's an organization that I suppose once did valuable work, and it is tempting to, provide some kindnesses for prisoners. But their organizations in recent years have they've gone crazy. When I interviewed Kim Pate, she pretty much put it to me that no females could be guilty of any crimes because of, well, sexism, systemic misogyny, and the like within society and within the justice system. And this is the sort of person who gets appointed to the Senate in my country nowadays. Uh, the Correctional Services of Canada says as of March 23rd, it had no confirmed COVID-19 cases and was well positioned to make the necessary clinical and operational decisions to protect staff, inmates, and the public. I'll tell you something about the criminal justice system in Canada. It's divided between federal and provincial. The criminal code is centralized. The criminal code of Canada is the responsibility of Parliament. However, if there is a category called indictable offenses, that is to say indictable under the criminal code, and these are offenses which carry a penalty of 2 years or more in prison. If you're convicted of one of those, you go to a federal penitentiary. If the conviction is less than 2 years, you go to a provincial penitentiary. It is exceedingly difficult to be convicted of an indictable offense under the criminal code in Canada. That is to say, the prisoners that we have in federal prisons are very bad people indeed. They're typically, convicted of violent crimes, often grotesquely violent crimes. There was a controversy some years ago about conditions in the Kingston prison for women in Ontario. And people like Kim Pate, were talking about how horrible the federal government was being to women prisoners. And an extraordinary move, Correctional Services of Canada, whatever they called themselves at the time, they sent to reporters who were writing on justice issues, as I was at the time, the dossiers, case reports of the women who were incarcerated in the Kingston Women's Prison. Now, they had blacked out the names, but it was absolutely appalling reading. It just seemed that so many of them were of some woman who goes up to an old person or, older people, like quite old, demanding money. And they didn't get the money, or they didn't get the money fast enough, so they beat these old people savagely. That's the kind of thing you have to do in order to go to prison in my country, at least in federal prison. And as I mentioned, I don't like to dwell on this, and I'm not looking for sympathy. I was rather savagely beaten by a stranger waiting for a bus in Vancouver in 1999. And the fellow who did it pleaded guilty to assault, and he was sentenced to a year to be served in the community, and I believe 100 hours community service. He spent a night in prison when he was arrested, and that's the only jail time he served. You probably have heard in the United States that prison reform involves keeping people who have been convicted of nonviolent crimes out of prison. Okay, that's exactly the same thing that happened in Canada. And I know because I wrote about it before it happened. And oh no, we won't be applying these so-called custodial sentences, non-custodial sentences, to people convicted of violent crimes. Yeah, they do. They lied about it. And they don't care. There are some people who are quite pleased by the coronavirus, or Corona-Chan, as some wags are calling it. This is from Summit News. A climate change group that aligns itself with Extinction Rebellion posted stickers claiming that coronavirus is the cure for the disease that is humanity. Earth is healing. The air and water is clearing. Corona is the cure. Humans are the disease. This is from Extinction Rebellion, East Midlands. That would be in England. While another branch of Extinction Rebellion challenged that this does not follow XR's principles, the East Midlands chapter doubled down. We are pointing out that from the perspective of the Earth, humans behave like a disease. The idea is not to be. Yeah, the Earth is not an entity in that sense. Oberon used to joke about the people talking about, the atmosphere is the lungs of the Earth. Well, the Earth is not a body, and it does not have lungs. While Extinction Rebellion East Midlands may represent little more than the ravings of one idiot, the notion that humanity somehow deserved coronavirus and that it's good for the planet has been widely shared by environmentalists and celebrities. After actor Idris Elba, who it would seem was infected by the Prime Minister of Canada's wife, tested positive for coronavirus, he claimed that COVID-19 was the planet reacting to the human race as revenge for climate change. I don't know whether I should read this. Just briefly, dozens of videos have emerged of Chinese citizens intentionally spreading the coronavirus by spitting on food inside of elevators and wiping saliva on park benches. Some of the videos shown display Chinese citizens spitting directly on strangers. And here's one from a supermarket in Sydney, Australia. And yeah, this is, oh, here's one from Canada. She blows her nose and rubs it all over the back of the bench. Yeah, as I say, these are videos, okay? This is from a site called, what, theirdelphants.com. Anyway, I mean, you could just search for that, Chinese intentionally spread coronavirus. Yeah, this is absolutely appalling behavior. I don't know that I could say or want to say more than that. But, you know, what's the most important thing in times of crisis like this? Well, the culture of death. The culture of death has, you know, obviously allied with COVID-19, the Wu flu, Wuhan virus, because social isolation, yeah, you can't see anybody, you can't do anything, stay in your house or else you'll be shouted at, beaten perhaps. In London, the police were cruising the Thames and they had, you know, bullhorn or loudspeaker on their boats, which was replaying that Monty Python song from The Life of Brian, Look on the Sunny Side of Life. That's quite possibly the most sinister thing that I've ever heard. If you've seen the film, of course, the song plays when you have all of these people crucified, right? So the police are saying, essentially, they're treating British citizens, you know, as if they are, well, that Britain's an occupied country, you know, but it's all very amusing. Here's a story from LifeSite News. The UK government has authorized women to kill their preborn children at home by using both stages of a chemical abortion process during the coronavirus pandemic. Women and girls will be able to take both pills for early medical abortion in their own homes without the need to first attend a hospital clinic. Medical practitioners will be able to prescribe both pills for the treatment of early medical abortion from their own home. See, that there's two different drugs that need to be taken, and protocols were set up. This couldn't be done privately because things often go bad. This is a dangerous and ill-thought-through move, said Antonio Tully from the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children. Mifepristone and misoprostol are powerful drugs designed to kill an unborn baby. The rules regulating them shouldn't be changed in this way. The Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has been campaigning for these DIY abortions for months as part of a propaganda campaign to assure women that abortion pills are simple and safe when they are anything but. Now they're exploiting a time of national crisis to make this ideological change. The celebrities, the bonfire of the celebrities, when is that coming? Not soon enough. This is manufactured consent. You know that it's real, you know that it's serious, you know that it's deadly because celebrities are involved. And it's almost as if they have been, you know, hired to do this or perhaps ordered to do this. And so the New York Post provides us with pictures of people that we are supposed to admire. Here's Brooke Shields. Why are you self-isolating? I stay at home because it's the right thing to do, says Brooke Shields. Chelsea Handler. Why anyone would have any interest in anything that Chelsea Handler has to say? I stay at home, oh, for Kevin Bacon, and she has a picture of an enormous nude black man, and she is shielding his genitals with her fingers. Ha ha. David Beckham staying home for his wife and kids. Demi Lovato, is she a celebrity? Is she? For her parents, neighbors, and her own. Elton John, just shut up, Elton John. Emma Watson is thinking of her grandma, mom, and best friend. Julia Roberts, I would ditch those glasses, Julia. They are not doing you a favor. For my family, for small businesses, yeah, but staying at home is not helping small businesses. Quite the opposite. Kelly Osbourne, is she still a celebrity? She's doing it for her father, Ozzy. Mariah Carey, couldn't they have got more sympathetic people here? Perry Edwards of Little Mix. This is in the New York Post, and Little Mix is a made-up English band that, as far as I know, no one knows about in the United States. Millie Bobby Brown wants the elderly and vulnerable to stay safe. Natalie Portman wants to keep her pregnant friends safe. Yeah, but are doctors going to attend to them? Mariska Hargitay and Peter Herman urge everyone to do the same because it's the right thing to do my heart, because we can only do this together. I don't know, I have one word for the celebrities, and it's an Italian word, and it is basta. That means enough. Oh, more celebrity news. Lena Dunham is publishing a romance novel, chapter by chapter, for quarantined singletons. And there's a picture of her with an enormous, oversized pair of glasses and the ring through the septum, as if she is a beast of burden. It's called Verified Strangers, and it's running on Vogue's website. And apparently you get to choose what people are going to do. The story's plot reportedly involves Ally, or Allie. She's 32, single, and nursing the kind of heartbreak that has taken years to mend. Los Angeles has a shortage of eligible men, so then her friend steps in and suggests that she date verified strangers, which means a friend of a friend. Verified in the sense that someone you know knows them, but a stranger in the sense that they are new to you. Such is the culture. And to wrap this up, this segment, at any rate, President Trump's job approval rating is up to 49%. So if the hysteria amongst the Democrats and the media was designed, like Russiagate and Ukrainegate, to destroy Orange Man bad, it has failed. Trump's 60% of Americans approve his handling of the coronavirus crisis, with 38% disapproving. The large part of this has to do with rally around the flag and the Rose Garden strategy, Jimmy Carter, as I explained a few days ago. But, actually hyping an existential crisis was perhaps not the smartest way for the Democrats and the media to oust Orange Man bad. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening where I live. And again, British Columbia is a province with 5.1 million people. There are now 659 confirmed cases in my province. There are 14 deaths. 14. 11 of them are at a single old age home in North Vancouver. That's 11 out of the 14. The average age of the people at this old age home in North Vancouver is 87. And they were infected by a nurse, and they bungled this. They completely bungled this. Let's see, how about Vancouver Island, where I live, which is the 8th largest island in the world, which has a population of close to 800,000 people. How many cases are there? Ooh, there's 47. That's up 3 from yesterday. How many deaths on Vancouver Island? 0. I'll repeat that. 0. None. So that's why the streets are deserted. That's why all the businesses are shut down, because we have 46 cases with 0 deaths. Let's go back to the chat here. Okay, let's go back a bit. It's going to kill a great many of them. Problem solved. People are talking about how it changed. Yeah, okay. 9/11 changed lives, and people were so agreeable to enhanced surveillance, turned airports into slums. This way, there's no blood on the replacement robots' hands or their masters, says Brandon Smith. Ronald P. says, funny how your feed suddenly is not appearing on my YouTube front page automatically anymore since I watch you every day. Yeah. The always look on the bright side of life. Did I get the title wrong? Perhaps I did. Lecomte de Barras says that social isolation model comes from watching Wuhan on TV. Great idea. Let's print. I wonder if KMG will feel guilty or ashamed if he is wrong about this virus. Well, you know, I've made my stand, and I do not think that what we have seen so far is has justified this. I've been for what, 3 weeks now? I've been reading out the numbers of confirmed infections from Vancouver Island. Exponential growth, my ass. Oh, you don't know what exponential growth means. Okay, maybe from 44 to 47 in a day is exponential growth. Oh, they're going to grow 3 a day? One person has died in my province of British Columbia in 2 days. One person in 2 days. And once again, of the 14 people who have died, 11 of them are at one old age home in North Vancouver, and 11 of them are dead because the facility completely botched healthcare protocols, or what I would assume to be normal healthcare protocols. So, you know, life's full of surprises, but I feel quite confident about this. Alex DeLarge, do you think this was a hoax? It's a hoax in the sense that Donald Trump said that it was a hoax. Influenza comes every year, and many people are infected and many people die. But the people who die are typically quite old people or younger people with seriously compromised immune systems. Alex DeLarge says that Trump's numbers are going to tank in a couple of weeks if he tries to force Americans back to work in the midst of a pandemic. Yeah, we shall see about that. People are talking about gold. I'm going to get out of gold. KMG thinks it's all a hoax to get Blumf out of office. Look, I talked about H1N1 and how many people, over 60 million people, were infected in the United States. There was no hysteria. In fact, if you weren't paying close attention to the news, you wouldn't even know that there was an epidemic. Why is this different? Why is this different? Well, it's different for one reason, that the media has decided that it can make a story. It can make any story. Oh, influenza, but it's the novel coronavirus. It's unlike every other form of influenza that has ever existed. I believe clearly that there are political motivations behind this, that every leader has been tested. Some of them, like Boris Johnson, panic and decide to become codios. Others, such as Sweden, do not panic. Your stand is preposterous. Oh, okay. Well, you've heard the numbers. You've heard the numbers. If you'd listened to yesterday's show, you would have heard from 12 different medical experts in this field explaining how this shutting down the economy and isolation is exactly the wrong thing to do for all sorts of reasons. Ricky Bullock says, what do you think the end game is? They've obviously blown this out of proportion, hardly with the economic fallout. Is it another financial scheme? Banks and large firms will own everything. Well, yes. Amazon, Walmart, I guess they're going to get bigger. And I saw on CNBC, it was like, oh, capital is just drooling at the mouth about all of these companies which can be got now for a fraction of their worth, or certainly a fraction of what they were selling for until recently. KMG is the high risk age. Higher risk, not high risk. I don't think I would say high risk. I may have mentioned before that I suspect that I've had it. Okay. It was suggested to me back in the 90s that I start taking zinc for various reasons. So I started taking zinc, and I have done so daily since around 1995. And I noticed a side effect of this, which is that I didn't get colds anymore, and I didn't get the flu anymore. I think it was in December or January when I was still involved in Luke Forestry. I got very sick for about a week, and just the cough and the fever and all the rest of it, and just the sort of feeling that your head is spinning and you can't concentrate on anything. So I think I may have had it, already. But speaking of someone who's in the high risk group, let's talk about Joe Biden. I think we've had enough debates, says Joe Biden. I think we should just get on with this. Joe Biden has become a meme. Every day there are several videos of him, and he seems to be wearing the same blue blazer. He looks like he's come up, from the set of Caddyshack, maybe Caddyshack 2. And so Nicole Wallace, who is a Republican hack, a conservative hack, is now with the MSNBC. And you talk about a softball interview. No, as at WellyDog67 says, the most sickening part of this is the gushing fangirl pretending to be a journalist. The U.S. people needed to ask this man some hard questions, like if elected, will you immediately resign in favor of Hillary? He keeps saying these stupid things and then stopping and saying, well, no, I shouldn't have said that, and then pause, and they just keep coming. They just keep coming. I mean, he's gone. He's completely gone. Now, does that matter? Well, according to Alex Wagner, that's a woman, she's a contributing writer at The Atlantic and co-host of The Circus, Stay Alive, Joe Biden. Democrats need little from the frontrunner beyond his corporeal presence. Corporeal meaning of the body. And that is to say, Joe Biden still alive. And so you may have heard of Yellow Dog Democrats. Well, Alex Wagner is introducing us to a new category, still has a pulse Democrats. That she is seriously arguing for several hundred words that it doesn't matter that Joe Biden is a disaster. Doesn't matter at all, because he's alive and he's going to win the Democratic nomination, and Orange Bad Man must lose. She confesses that he was never much good even before, but is Joe Biden? Let's see. Biden's team seems to understand this and to believe that what matters now most is keeping their candidate alive in the American imagination as an alternative to Trump. His appearances these days have an almost parallel universe quality to them. Biden's audienceless remarks from his home in Delaware have the suggestion of an Oval Office address, and their content seems intended to offer a glimpse into the twilight zone where someone else, someone more emphatic and capable, is president. What? It's as if Biden is telegraphing to the public, you've already imagined that I can beat Trump. Now imagine what it will be like when I am president. Yes, a senile buffoon. But no, see, he's alive, and he's a Democrat, and he is not Donald Trump. It's just, he has nothing to say. Biden has absolutely nothing to say, and he says it exceedingly badly. Another piece from the Federalist, this time from John Daniel Davidson, talks about Joe Biden. Oh, I will say, maybe you've seen some clips of Trump recently. There was an amusing one the other day where some public health care official, a woman, was talking about how she'd had symptoms, fever, cough, or whatever. And like a professional comedian, Trump just sort of waltzed away from her, from the podium. And then he smiled and came back, and people laughed. This sort of confidence inspires people. The kind of incompetence displayed by Joe Biden does not inspire people. This is what John Daniel Davidson says. Biden's clips so far don't inspire confidence. Maybe you've seen them. In a string of interviews this week on CNN, MSNBC, and ABC, Biden came across as even more befuddled and rambling than he was on the campaign trail, by turns interrupting himself, trailing off dejectedly, and coughing through interviews. Biden was never a great candidate, but this is just dismal. As the likely Democratic nominee, the timing of this worldwide pandemic couldn't be worse. Biden's basically been reduced to being a podcaster. You almost feel sorry for the guy. Almost. The Atlantic ran an unintentionally humorous piece this week with the plaintive headline, "Stay Alive, Joe Biden." Yes, corporeal presence. And from the looks of it, that's all they're likely to get. He notes that fact checkers seems to be turning against Joe Biden. But how about China? The Wuhan virus, the Wu flu, coronavirus comes from China. How does Joe Biden stand vis-a-vis China? Never in his long political career has Biden been willing to stand up to Beijing. He's never so much as expressed hesitancy about the risks of free trade with China or the cost it might impose on American workers, but has been a consistent champion of greater economic integration with China. As a senior Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in the 1990s, Biden pushed for China's membership in the World Trade Organization, blocking measures that would have imposed human rights requirements in exchange for most favored nation status. As Barack Obama's vice president, he worked for closer ties with China, praising Beijing as a new partner in 2012 as President Xi Jinping consolidated power. A short while later, as everyone now knows, his son Hunter Biden traveled with him to Beijing and later joined the board of a Shanghai-based private equity firm. And of course, throughout his years as vice president, China continued to build military outposts on contested islands in the Pacific, threaten its neighbors, and assert sovereignty over some of the busiest commercial shipping lanes in the world, all without hardly any pushback from Biden and Obama. So no, a Biden White House would not make Beijing pay a price for covering up the coronavirus and endangering the entire world. Biden will not work to uncouple critical supply chains from China or bring back manufacturing jobs to American workers. I wanted to talk about a story. I just mentioned briefly this stupid piece in the New York Times. I've been forcing myself to look at the main page of the New York Times every day, rather rigorously. Of course, you know, if you spend any time on the web, then you're exposed to New York Times stories. But I just wanted to immerse myself in the New York Times Weltanschauung. And there's a story: the people leading when leaders do not. Jamie Dove, seen posing outside of County Line Pie, his temporary closed pizza restaurant in Chuckey, Tennessee. He owns 3 restaurants in and around Johnson City, Tennessee, and he shuttered all 3 because of the coronavirus. Business was good, but he closed all the restaurants because, if not me, then who? And this is a hero of our time, according to the New York Times, that closed down businesses, put people out of work, frightened people, and that's a hero. Because apparently the leaders, America's leaders, are not going far enough in destroying the economy. Thomas Edsall has a piece in the New York Times called "In God We Divide, the Political Dimensions of Worship Have Never Been Greater." Long story short, it's official that the Democratic Party is the atheist party. As mainstream Protestant denominations have declined over the past half century, there has been a hollowing out of the center among white Christians of all faiths. New generations of Americans have joined the ranks of evangelical churches, while others in larger numbers have forsaken religion altogether. The more religiously engaged a white voter is, the more likely he or she will be a Republican. The less religious the voter, the more likely to be a Democrat. How about that? In 1988, 55.7% of Americans were members of traditional mainstream denominations. 36.6% were members of evangelical and born-again denominations, and 7.7% said they were not religious. By 2018, membership in traditional denominations had fallen 20 points to 35.5%. Born-again evangelical church membership had grown 4.8% to 41.4%, and the share of the non-religious had tripled to 23.1%. In an email, Ryan Burge, a political scientist at Eastern Illinois University, said, in just a few years, there will be no moderate Protestants left. And Edsel says this has been a windfall for the Republican Party. Burge, almost every predominantly white Protestant denomination, from Southern Baptists and United Methodists to Missouri Synod Lutherans and the Assemblies of God, is solidly Republican. And apparently, this is true regardless of economics. It is if you're rich, if you're poor, the same thing applies. And yes, take white working class Democrats. How important is religion to you? Very important, somewhat important, not very important, and not at all. Among whites without degrees, the polling definition of working class, 39% in 2018 said religion was very important. At the other end of the spectrum, nearly 4 out of 5, 78% of non-college whites who said religion was very important, voted for a Republican House candidate. Now, we've seen from people like Major Tom Nichols and Jennifer Rubin, they've been sort of hinting that maybe we can, disenfranchise these horrible, horrible white people without college degrees, because that's how Trump won, because all the dummies voted for him. But this is not good for the Democratic Party. I mean, the number of people without religion is going to continue to grow. But one does not want to be known as the atheist party. And I suppose that's why this is a trial balloon. Pete Buttigieg is sort of a trial balloon, Oh, because he was so into his Episcopalianism, which reminds me of a joke from a very bad John Hughes film called National Lampoon's Class Reunion. Garrett Graham, very, very funny man. He is asked, "Are you a religious man?" And he responds, "Certainly not. I'm an Episcopalian." Anyway, let's talk about gold. According to MarketWatch, Goldman Sachs says it is time to buy gold, the currency of last resort. Maybe it is this time, but I've been burned by this before. Not personally. I'm not an investor. I never have been an investor. It's just that I wrote some things which were perhaps a little enthusiastic about gold after around 2010, 2011. And as I've explained previously, it's a fixed system. It's a rigged casino, because whenever gold starts to really take off, it gets slammed down in the middle of the night by suspicious, impossible billion-dollar trades. But in any event, the current coronavirus-induced economic and financial market turmoil is seemingly the perfect environment for gold. We have long argued that gold is the currency of last resort, acting as a hedge against currency debasement when policymakers act to accommodate shocks, such as the one being experienced now, said analysts at Goldman Sachs, led by Jeffrey Curry. While the yellow metal has done far better than other assets, it has slipped 2% over the last month. The Goldman analysts, with a 12-month price target of $1,800 an ounce, said that is about to change, thanks to the Federal Reserve's aggressive bond purchase plan unveiled on Monday, in which the U.S. Central Bank said it would buy as many treasuries and mortgage-backed securities as needed to keep financial markets running smoothly. The Goldman analyst said gold has been weighed down in a world in need of dollars, requiring forced sales of liquid assets like gold. The downturn in oil, as Saudi Arabia and Russia failed to agree on production cuts, has also created dollar shortages for emerging market economies, which may have made Russia a net seller of gold. Back when I wrote about the market, I talked to a lot of analysts and I read a lot of analysts' report, and I became very familiar with 12-month price targets. Now, I won't say that they are, sticking their thumb in their mouths, pausing, pulling the thumb out, and saying the 12-month price target is this. But with regard to metals, for a period of a couple of years, again, let's say roughly 2011 to 2014, 2015, the market analysts were disastrously wrong in their 12-month price targets for mining stocks of all kinds. They were far too optimistic, far too optimistic. And I wondered, is there like a 3 strikes you're out, or maybe a 23 strikes you're out rule for market analysts? There doesn't seem to be. In 2008, the Goldman analyst noted the November announcement of quantitative easing was a turning point. Yes, that is true. The analyst said, with the Fed easing funding stresses, focus will likely shift to the large size of the Fed balance sheet expansion, increase in developed market fiscal deficits, and concerns about the sustainability of the European Monetary Union. We believe this will likely lead to debasement concerns similar to the post-2008 period, they said. In an electronic trade on Tuesday, gold futures rose $97 an ounce. So I'm looking at goldprice.org here. So, I see that silver is trading at $14.37 American. And based on, what I thought I knew about the silver market, the price of silver should be much higher than this, but it isn't. And I'm looking at the 10-year gold price in US dollars. You see a tremendous rise beginning in 2010, where in 2011 the price of gold tops $1,800, almost at $1,900. Then it falls, and another rise again in late 2012, and then an exceedingly steep decline all the way to 2016, and then a rise in 2016 to about $1,375, and then it goes down again to under $1,200 in late 2018, and now we see the rise to the current price of $1,609. So obviously, buying gold after 2011, 2012, well, you've done very, very poorly. I mean, you've lost money. If you had just a basket fund investment in the Dow, up till a few weeks ago, you would have made a great deal of money indeed. But let's see. Let's go to this man called Roy Sebag, who is the founder of Gold Money. And he says, there's a question, well, what's going on in the gold market? What's going on in the gold market? He says 2 important facts have been withheld from the CME PR. Which banks were short $16 billion more physical than in the CME vaults and required a bailout? 2, how will LBMA metal in London be used to settle delivery in New York during COVID shutdown? Another sad day for free markets. Yeah, institutions say they have gold. Do they have this gold? Has it been hypothecated? Has it been re-hypothecated? Let's see. He writes one final point, then taking a short break from Twitter. The banks are bluffing by claiming to have lots of supply of LBMA bars in London. My own research indicates that at current net demand for LBMA bars, and assuming mines remain shut, LBMA bars will be out by June. The official news is now out that COMEX agreed to break contract terms to protect banks. Yeah, see, that's a problem with gold ownership. That you don't want to store it on your premises, so you hold it in a bank. Yeah, and what is the bank doing with it? Is the bank, protecting your gold, Or is it rehypothecating it? Is it giving it to someone else and just telling you that it's holding the gold for you? I remember a few years ago, there was a belief that the price of gold was going to rise substantially because it turns out that there is far less gold than is commonly believed. That there's that the gold market in terms of bullion is a Potemkin village, with institutions saying, "Oh yeah, we have all this gold." Well, no, they don't have the gold, and the gold vanished a long time ago. There was a talk about an audit of Fort Knox, and some people were saying that the gold vanished a long time ago. I've received some important information relating to what's going on in gold markets. Today, some banks failed to deliver physical in the COMEX bar EFP. As a result, these banks suffered huge losses, which will soon be announced. They've also decided to exit the COMEX market. Now there remains a big shortage in physical in the COMEX denomination, so rumors are the COMEX will announce a force majeure and allow banks to deliver LBMA bars instead. This should be announced imminently. And there's a philosophical statement from him here, from Roy Sebag. Gold is our only tether to nature, as everything else from food to wares is subject to temporal decay. The farmer toiling right now can't accelerate his crop harvest no matter how much the Fed prints. Gold reminds us of that delicate balance between nature, man, and cooperation. And Gold Money, the company of which he is the founder, says, "Do you know all our client assets are segregated, fully reserved, one-to-one, and securely stored in insured vaults around the world?" Woody Allen's book was finally published. Now, his son, Ronan, had Hachette kill the book, spike the book. Apparently, is the head of Ronan is the head of the American Index. He is the censor prohibitum of American publishing. But it got published elsewhere. This fellow was originally called Satchel, after Satchel Paige, the black baseball player, Negro League star. Normally, in cases where children are given goofball names, I would say like at 90 to 95% of the time, the mother is to blame. But clearly, since one could not have expected Mia Farrow to know who Satchel Paige was, this is very much man stuff. It's clear that Woody came up with this absurd and insulting name for his son. It makes me hard, especially in light of everything else we know about him, to have any sympathy for him. I'm reminded of a Kendall Roy on Succession. Not much is made about this. It just sort of dropped, right? That Kendall has 2 children. Now, whose children are they, actually? I mean, biologically. Because one of the children, his daughter, is clearly a South Indian, quite possibly a Tamil. And, well, the other one is this autistic child. But he named his son Iverson. Again, one can't blame the mother for this, Rava or whatever her name is, because Allen Iverson, the 76ers basketball player, bad boy, imagine naming your son Iverson. What, to use a Canadianism, what kind of dink would do that? Anyway, Woody Allen sensationally paints Mia Farrow as a controlling and troubled mother who slept naked in bed with her prize son Ronan until he was 11, he says in his new memoir. The Annie Hall auteur, now 84, claimed that Farrow, who has 11 living children, 4 of whom are biological and 7 who are adopted, first told him she wanted to have his baby on one of their first dates, calling it a red flag. Yeah, but you still went ahead, didn't you, Woody? Weeks later, while on a date at a Chinese restaurant, she suggested they marry, a suggestion Allen said he quickly brushed off, confessing in all their years together he never once slept the night at her home. Well, yeah, 11 children running around. Mia Farrow is nuts. she's been nuts for a long time. This doesn't mean that Woody Allen is not perhaps guilty of what he has been accused of, but there's no question that Mia Farrow is nuts and that her family is nuts and that there's a proven deep strain of child molestation in the Farrow family. Allen accused Farrow of being screwed up and potentially molested. He described Mia's family as rife with extremely ominous behavior that swelled in the years that I knew her. These just aren't rumors, by the way. This is documented. The star, Mia's brother, John Charles Villiers Farrow, was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2013 for molesting boys. Allen writes that he heard a rumor early on that Mia's brothers had been aggressive with the Farrow sisters and that the Farrow brother, who is now serving years in prison for child molestation, had said that their father had molested him. Allen lashed out at Farrow's parenting and obsession with adopting, claiming she treated orphans like toys, once sending back a Mexican infant from Texas for reasons known only to her. He also claimed that Farrow also sent back a little boy with spina bifida who lived in her apartment for several weeks because her son Fletcher found him annoying. If there were other kids she adopted and returned, I have no idea. As I said, I lived on the other side of the park. She also frequently hit Sunyi, he claimed. Sunyi is the Korean adopted child of Mia Farrow's that Woody Allen started an affair with, and Mia discovered the nude Polaroids he'd taken, and that's when the war began. Of course, Woody and Sunyi have been married for quite a long time now. Woody Allen said he was first warned off from dating Farrow by Dory Previn, who said that Farrow had lured away her husband, Andre Previn. Well, you know, again, these people have histories. And yes, Dory Previn was married to Andre Previn, and Mia Farrow, well, she decided she wanted Andre Previn. And yeah, and so, you know, it's very sad for Dory. Dory, who wrote a song about Farrow's alleged betrayal called Beware of Young Girls, alerted him to a song she wrote called Daddy in the Attic after Farrow accused him of molesting their young daughter, Dylan. She told me Mia would sing it. She's certain that's what gave Mia the idea to locate a fake molestation accusation she would make in the attic. Given the poisoning that has gone on, the poisoning of the minds of the Farrow children, I think that the only person who knows what actually happened is Woody Allen. I don't think the children are in any mental position to state what happened. I don't think they even know what happened. But, you know, to the extent that I would have any sympathy for Woody Allen, it is diminished by the fact that he willingly entered into a lengthy relationship with a woman who was clearly crazy. You know, Johnny Depp and Brad Pitt are getting a lot of sympathy for their marital woes. Johnny Depp was with Amber Heard, and Brad Pitt was with what's her name? Okay, it'll come to me in a minute. The point is that no one held a gun to their heads and forced them to marry crazy lesbians. So no, I don't have a lot of sympathy for them. So let's, the heart wants what it wants. Yeah, okay, the heart wants what it wants, but I guess the brain decides. What do you think of theories that Ronan is really Frank Sinatra's son? I don't buy it. It would seem that, from what I've read, that Frank was not physically capable of fathering a son at that time. What else we got here? Oh, Ronan. Yeah. You see, the Farrows are Irish. They're such an Irish family, the Farrows. So Ronan. Yeah. Oil will remain cheap as Iran's enemies seek to deprive it of revenue, says Jonathan Pohl. Toilet paper sales great. Watch who bought the toilet paper companies. Well, there's also, I suppose, the forestry companies that provide the trees. Bernard Brightson said Woody Allen made up his own name. He was born Alan Stewart Königsberg, or Königsberg, as the Germans say. It's funny, I found this out a long time ago. Königsberg. Oh, and then it led me to a realization. that when you see someone whose name is that of a city or some sort of variation, Breslau or whatever, right? London or Londoner, that these names are Jewish, you know. But French is argent, for example. By the way, tomorrow is Nancy Pelosi's birthday, says MCT. Don't forget to call her office and express your congratulations. Brandon Smith, the word for money in many cultures is silver. Yes, I've talked about that movie L'Argent by Robert Bresson. It's based on a Tolstoy story called The Forged Coupon. If you ever want to have really dark feelings, emotions about the nature of humanity, I would recommend watching Bresson's film L'Argent. It is uncompromising. Jonathan Paul says Russia has a lot of gold, or Kolyma was devoted to gold mining. It's not just that. If you look at the people who are involved, the three countries, or the people of the three countries that are most involved in mining around the world, they are Canadians, Australians, and Russians. A gold bug pejorative because kryptonite. It's funny. Gold bug comes from this Edgar Allan Poe story, and it's clear that the people who use the phrase gold bug pejoratively, they have not read the Edgar Allan Poe story. I won't spoil it for you, but no. Someone suggested that I review Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death. Well, perhaps I will. Jonathan Paul says, I am a Presbyterian. Okay. A great idea for a religious movie, The Mod Prods, says STFU James M. Alrighty, I am going to wrap this up. Thank you all for watching and or listening. I will be back on the air tomorrow, and tomorrow is Thursday. So we are going to be talking about a movie, and that movie is Touch of Evil by Orson Welles, directed and starring Orson Welles from 1958, which is a movie about borders, the border between America and Mexico, and borders are much in the news. So I'll be on the air at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. If you like the show or any part thereof, I would greatly appreciate it if you'd press the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you wish to support this stream, my PayPal account is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you all have a pleasant and non-lonely evening.